Hey guys, Dr. Shields here. Listen, today we're going to be discussing something that's very important, and that's hormonal imbalance. Right now, hormonal imbalance is absolutely ruining the lives of millions of people, and the problem is that nobody's talking about the causes. Right now, we've waged the war on cancer, and in the 15 years that I've been speaking to people about cancer, what we found is that the rates have gone from 1 in every 12 to 1 in every 8 women right now are developed with breast cancer. We're also finding the same cause that causes breast cancer also causes prostate cancer in men. And we're going to talk about that as well later. And it's unfortunate that so many people are suffering and they don't know what the root cause of this hormonal balance is. Now, some of the signs that you could have hormonal balance are that you could have cysts or fibroids, or you could have endometriosis. We know that if somebody's having a lot of bloating or swelling before their menstrual cycles, that can be a problem. We know that if somebody's having excessive hair growth, that can be a sign that their hormones are out of balance. We know that if someone's having hot flashes, that can be a sign of hormonal imbalance. We know that if somebody's having heavy or long menstrual cycles, that can be a sign of hormonal imbalance. You know, what's interesting is I can't tell you how often I hear people say, well, my cycle's 7 days long, it's heavy, it's clotty, and the first day I have to change almost every hour. And to them, that's normal. They say, you know, that's just normal. But realistically, that's the body saying something's not working properly, something's out of balance, but all too often we're told, oh, that's just normal. And if it's not, and if you are troubled by the problems of this cycle, then simply just take a birth control, which doesn't address the root cause of the issue. Yes, it may help the hormonal symptoms, but it's not addressing the root cause, which then allows the problem to deteriorate and potentially could lead to more problems. And that's exactly what we're going to be discussing a little bit later, is some of these treatments we're using are actually making the problem worse. We also know that changes in your mood or changes in your sex drive. You know, I can't tell you how many times we've had patients where their spouses have come in and thanked us for starting care here because they've seen a huge improvement in their libido. We also know that changes in your deep sleep and anxiety or depression can occur when you have a hormonal imbalance. Now, the most common hormonal imbalance that we see in our office is a estrogen-progesterone imbalance. And what that means is that the hormones are they work in a yin and a yang fashion where, for example, the estrogen's a little bit more excitatory. The progesterone is a little bit more calmative. The estrogen has powerful anti-inflammatory effects. Progesterone's more about growth. So when we look at these hormones, it's important to understand that unfortunately with the current medical testing that we're looking at, the ranges are so wide and so broad that it's missed on so many patients. They'll go in and say, well, my estrogen levels are normal, my progesterone levels are normal, but when we look at them a little bit closer, we can see, well, actually your estrogen levels are up here, your progesterone levels are here, they're still within the normal limits, but that's not a good balance. But the other problem that we're going to see with this estrogen-progesterone imbalance is that your blood test for estrogen, now listen, this is very important, your blood test for estrogen don't actually register or read xenoestrogens. Now, xenoestrogens are estrogens that are created industrially, that are in the environment, that don't pick up on a blood test because that's simply looking at your estrogens or your estradiols. And so it's important to find out if you're exposed to these xenoestrogens, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do you find out if these xenoestrogens are indeed affecting you? Because these xenoestrogens, they go to the same receptors and they'll act on the same tissues that estrogens will, and they can actually cause cancer. And that's what the science and the research is showing us, but yet it's something that's being completely ignored. So, the number one cause to hormonal imbalance, and I think I've already given you guys a few hints, is industrialization. In the last 200 years, we've seen this country and this world undergo dramatic changes. Right now, if you think about it, look at this. This is a chicken in 1950. Versus a chicken in 2008. Look at the size difference of these chickens. Even though this one's 21 days younger, it's twice the size. How did we do that? We created a hormonal imbalance in these chickens by basically causing this chicken to have diabetes. That made that chicken grow. We're using pesticides, we're using herbicides, we're using medications. The farm animals are using medications. We're seeing more farming, we're seeing the animals release more urine, which has more of their hormones into our water system. We're seeing that there's foods, chemicals, toxins. We know that, for example, that there's certain plastics now in our environment that can mimic estrogens. We know that stress can create an imbalance in our estrogens, but ultimately the industrialization is what's led to this issue. What's happened, look at this, since 1950, we've seen the amount of pesticides and herbicides used in our land go up 100-fold almost from 1950. So this is all runs off from the sites, from the farmer's land into the water system. And when this runs into the water system, it then is going to go into our tap water and affect you. It's going to go into our animals and affect us. That's what we're seeing now, is that we have industrial waste. For example, we're going to talk about in a minute, there's some PCBs and DDTs, these certain chemicals that mimic estrogens that come from industrial waste areas. We know that hospital waste can affect our water supply. We know that domestic waste from our homes, and the feed operations, the hormones that they use for the animals, also the antibiotics, as well as the hormones that the animals are excreting in their urine, they can all go into the water supply and they can affect our health. The average woman in the United States right now uses 168 chemicals per day in her self-care regimen. 168 chemicals. And many of these chemicals have been linked to be xenoestrogens or mimic estrogens. And guys, one of the things, this article published in Newsweek in 1994, what's interesting is I've been lecturing on this exact slide almost for 15 years now. And before I ever moved to Michigan, when I still lived in Georgia. But what's interesting is they found that the fish in the Great Lakes were exposed to these certain chemicals and toxins from insecticides, as well as from electrical manufacturing, where they make the plastics that prevent plastics from the electrical wires, the wiring. Those insecticides and those plastics leaked into the water, and when the birds would eat the fish that were in the water, it led to them becoming hermaphrodites, where the birds would then have the sex of both male and female. That's how toxic and polluted these waters can be, and how much they can affect our endocrine system. So only imagine, for those of you that are watching this, many of you live in Michigan or areas of high agricultural use or high industrial use, these chemicals are going to absolutely affect your hormones and affect the way that your body functions. Look at this next one. This is a test that we can run in our office, actually, and it looks at phthalates and parabens. Phthalates and parabens have both been known to disrupt the endocrine system or disrupt the hormonal system. Now, these two in particular, you'll see a lot of days where you'll have shampoos or deodorants or lotions that'll say that they're paraben-free or phthalate-free, because in Europe, these chemicals are so toxic and so poisonous that they've actually been outlawed. But here in the United States, they still have not been. So it's important. This is one of the tests that we can run. We can say, hey, look, these are phthalates and parabens. These are xenoestrogens. These could be affecting your hormonal issues. And so that's why it's so important to have these types of things discovered. It's also important that you go to a website. It's called ewg.org/skindeep. On this website, you can put your products that you're using in and search it up, and they'll tell you the types of chemicals that are in there. It'll tell you the safety of those types of products, and kind of let you know, give your products that you're using a score. So that's a great place you can go. Here's a study that was done in the Environmental International. It's a research article, and what they found is that estrogens that are at pollutant levels have been linked with breast cancer in women and prostate cancer with men. So I told you I was going to recirculate to this. But what we're finding now, it's not as much about testosterone being the cause of prostate cancer. What we're finding now, it's about estrogens are actually are a big major cause of prostate cancer, as well as another hormone that's not as common as testosterone, but called DHT. It's a bit more of it's more of an aggravating hormone. But think about this, guys. Haven't we seen breast cancer rates go up? Haven't we seen estrogen, prostate cancers go up? This is one of the impacts, like we talked about earlier, the runoff from all the industrial sites, the agricultural sites, as well as even the hormones that we're currently taking have been found in our water supply. So it's so important that the water that you eat, the water that you drink, has been purified. And one of the things that we use in our house is actually just the one filter, and it really has been shown to help get those hormones, those chemicals out of that water supply and make it much safer for you to drink, as well as the animals that we're eating as well can be exposed to these toxins and chemicals. Even if they're organic, they can still have bad exposure to waters and these chemicals, and they can still get into your food supply. So it's something to be mindful of, that we can try to reduce the risk, but we're not going to eliminate it completely. Another thing that we found too is that The contemporary hormonal contraception and the risk of breast cancer. Guys, this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So this is something that we need to understand and really look at. And what they found is that the relative risk of breast cancer among all current and recent uses of hormonal contraception risk was 1.2. And what that means is 1.0 would be the same. So 1.2 means that it's a 20% increase for people that have used hormones at any time in their life. But what they found when they looked deeper into the numbers, they found that if you used the medication or the birth control for less than a year, your rate was only 0.109. So not quite a 10% increase, but still a 9% increase, something that we don't want. We don't want to increase our risk at all. But if after 10 years, your risk went up to 1.38%, which is 38% more likely to get breast cancer if you took birth control for more than 10 years. So what have we seen happen in the 60s and the 70s? We started to see birth control. It was starting to be released, and it was starting to be used at massive amounts and massive quantities across our population. So is that one reason why we've seen that breast cancer rates and those things go up? And I know that a lot of you right now are watching this, you're probably thinking, well, I take birth control because if I don't, my menstrual cycles they're crazy, I get acne, all these other health issues. But I can tell you that we've seen people with all sorts of health issues that were using birth control to help with those symptoms, but when we find out the cause and address it, they don't need these birth control. And then I know a lot of you are going to ask questions about contraception. Well, how do you prevent having a child? I don't need a child. That's a different discussion for a different day, but there are definitely methods out there that are safer and as effective. You just have to learn those and look for those. Now, another thing that we do in our office here, like we like to do for a lot of our patients, is we like to test to see how well their bodies are metabolizing these estrogens. So if my body's been exposed to xenoestrogens, estrogens out in the environment, plus the estrogens in my body, all those estrogens are going to have to be processed, and they're going to have to be detoxified and eliminated, or else they can accumulate in the body and cause problems. And so what we do is we actually can look at, in this patient, for example, this is like a speedometer, 0 to 60. This patient's well over the speed limit on all three markers for estrogen, the estrone, estradiol, and estriol. Now, a lot of you would say, well, their body's making too much estrogen. That's not necessarily the case here. What happens is, if you've turned the water on in your bathtub and that water is filling up the bathtub, over time that water is going to overflow and now go into the house and ruin the house. So it's easy to say, well, the problem is the water, we need to cut the water off to the house. But what would make sense is if we pulled the plug, it would let the water drain back down. So because we're exposed to all these xenoestrogens and all these estrogens that our bodies are making, it's going to start to accumulate if the body's not detoxifying properly. So in this patient, what we found down here is that they're not methylating, that they're not detoxifying the hormones properly, which is allowing them to build up. On this patient, fast forward a few months later, the estrogens are now at the normal levels, and they're also methylating, they're detoxifying the hormones properly. Now the estrogen levels are coming back to normal, so they're not having to use hormones, they're not having to use treatments to address the symptoms, but instead, we've now found a natural solution. A lot of you, if your concern is about breast cancer, if you have a family history of cancer, or if you have any hormonal symptoms, I can tell you the first place you need to look at is something like this, to find out, is the body detoxifying, is eliminating these hormones properly? Now listen, guys, there's a lot more information we can go into, guys. This is just one cause of hormonal imbalance. On January 11th, Saturday, at 10:30 in the morning here at this clinic, we're going to be having what we call a New Year, New You celebration. This is a kickoff for many of you that are watching this right now that have been struggling with your health and don't know why. You know, I have seen this seminar, and I've seen the people that have attended the seminar. I've seen this moment change the rest of their life. So if you'd like, there's going to be a link somewhere below. Click that link and schedule for your upcoming seminar. If you don't want to wait for that seminar and you want to get into our office as soon as possible to find out what it is that we can do to help you, click that Schedule Now button and come in and meet with us. And one of our doctors will help you and find out what it is that we can do to help you get control over your health. You know, ultimately, if your body has any symptoms, headaches, migraines, digestive concerns, if you're having heart palpitations, if you're having constipation, diarrhea, if you're having food cravings, if you're having heavy menstrual cycles, if you're having infertility issues, all these causes, all of these problems have a cause. And all these symptoms are trying to tell you is that something's not working properly in your body and you need to address it. We don't need to keep using medications to suppress these symptoms, but we need to find out what's causing these issues. So guys, if you like today, please like, share, comment, let your friends know about it. This information could change, it could save their life. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Take care. Get well, stay well.